When I knocked on the glass doors of her mansion, she didn't recognize me at first. But when her eyes finally met mine, the silence between us said everything money never could. The morning sun filtered weakly through the torn lace curtains of a small countryside home. The kettle hissed on the stove, the sound too loud for such a quiet kitchen. Helen sat alone at the table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, watching steam rise and disappear, much like the years that had drifted away since she last saw her daughter Claire. The clock ticked above the stove, steady, relentless, almost mocking. She reached for a photograph on the table. It was worn, the edges curled, the image slightly faded. A younger Claire with a crooked smile, graduation cap slightly askew, her arm wrapped around her mother. That photo had been taken 10 years ago, the last time they stood close without words hanging like glass between them. Hey there, my dear family and friends. If you're already tuned in and ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because tomorrow I'll be bringing you another story just as captivating, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Now back to the story. A letter lay beside the photo. Not written, just the paper. Helen had tried for months to find the courage to start it. How are you? Felt too small. I miss you felt too heavy. Instead, she whispered into the still air. You've done well, baby. No one answered, but in her mind she could hear Claire's voice. Younger, eager, full of dreams. One day, Mom, you'll see my name on something big. And you'll be proud. Helen was proud. Always had been. But pride can twist itself into silence, especially when love and disappointment live too close together. She took a deep breath and folded the blank paper into her coat pocket. Her bus ticket lay beside it, a one-way trip to the city where Claire now lived, far from the small-town life that once felt like everything they needed. Today, Helen decided, she wouldn't wait for her daughter to come home. She would go to her. In a tower of glass and marble, Claire moved through her morning like a rehearsed performance. Assistants trailed her, voices overlapping. Your 10 a.m. with investors, the charity gala confirmation, the Paris line shipment. She nodded mechanically, her eyes on the view. Skyscrapers bathed in morning gold, the hum of ambition below. She had built this life from nothing. She had earned every inch of it. Yet lately, she couldn't shake the feeling that something vital had gone missing. Success filled her days, but not her heart. Would you like me to schedule lunch with your mother next weekend? Her assistant, Riley, asked casually, scrolling through a tablet. Claire froze. My mother, she echoed, tone clipped. Riley looked up, startled. Well, I saw her name in your old contact list and thought. Delete it, Claire said quietly. Her tone wasn't cruel, just final. Riley hesitated, then nodded and stepped out, leaving Claire alone in the sprawling silence. Her reflection in the glass wall stared back at her. Confident, composed, unshakable. But for a moment, her eyes softened, flickering with something unspoken. Guilt, shame, maybe longing. She turned away, whispering to herself. She made her choice. And so did I. Still, as she sipped her coffee, she thought of home, of cheap curtains, the smell of rain on dirt roads, and her mother's voice calling her for dinner. The ache that followed was sharp, familiar, and unwanted. Back in the countryside, Helen stepped outside, locking the creaky door behind her. The wind bit at her cheeks as she walked down the gravel path, suitcase in hand, her heart pounding like a drum. It wasn't anger that drove her. It was something quieter. The kind of longing that survives after love has been buried under years of silence. She boarded the bus, settling near the window. The seat beside her stayed empty. The countryside faded into the rhythm of the road, rolling fields giving way to endless concrete. She closed her eyes and prayed silently, please, God. Just let her be okay. The bus hissed to a stop hours later in front of a glittering skyline. Helen stepped out, clutching her coat tighter, feeling impossibly small among the city's towering reflections. She checked the crumpled address she'd written from an old magazine interview. Claire Morgan, CEO of the Velvet Line. Her daughter's name looked foreign on paper. Glamorous, successful, untouchable. Helen's hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "That's my baby." By late afternoon, Helen stood before an enormous house. Glass, steel, and silence. The kind of place where every window looked too clean to breathe. The gate clicked open after she pressed the intercom. A voice, robotic and polite, said, "Please state your purpose." Helen hesitated, then answered softly, "I'm here to see my daughter." Buzz. Then a buzz. The gate slid open. Her footsteps echoed against the stone driveway. She stopped at the massive front doors and pressed the bell. Her heart thudded like thunder in her chest. When the door finally opened, Claire stood there, elegant, poised, and utterly stunned. For a long second neither moved. Helen's lips trembled. "Hello, sweetheart." Claire blinked as though seeing a ghost. "Mom." The word fell from her mouth like it hadn't been used in years. Helen smiled, small and fragile. "You look beautiful." Claire's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. Behind her, the house felt suddenly too large, too empty, too quiet. "Come in," she said at last. As Helen stepped across the threshold, their worlds, one of simplicity, one of splendor, collided in a silence heavy enough to break hearts. The warmth between them was gone, but the love, though buried, still flickered beneath the ache. Helen looked around, eyes wide, whispering, "You really made it, didn't you?" Claire nodded, but the pride didn't reach her smile. In that heavy pause, viewers can almost feel what they can't say. Was success worth the silence? If you had one chance to speak to someone you've lost touch with, what would you say first? Share your thoughts below. This is where Act 1 ends, and their real journey begins. Helen followed Claire into the mansion, her worn shoes nearly silent on the marble floor. The place was stunning. Every surface gleamed, every color matched, every breath felt measured. But it didn't smell like home. No cinnamon, no dust, no faint aroma of rain-damp laundry or Sunday soup. Just perfection. Claire gestured toward the living room. "You can sit," she said softly, her voice composed but trembling underneath. Helen nodded, clutching her bag to her chest. "You've done well, sweetheart. Really well." Claire forced a smile. "Thank you, Mom." The word Mom came out stiff, as if unused. Silence stretched. The ticking of a designer clock filled the void. Helen's eyes drifted over the photos lining the wall. Claire on magazine covers, award ceremonies, business galas. Not one showed family. Not one showed the girl with messy hair and scraped knees who used to climb apple trees in the backyard. "You must be proud," Helen said quietly. Claire hesitated, folding her arms. "I worked hard for this." "I know you did." Helen's voice softened. "I saw the article. The one where they called you the self-made queen of fashion. That must have felt nice." Claire's lips curved slightly, but her eyes stayed guarded. "It did. I built everything from the ground up." Helen nodded slowly, but her gaze lingered on the empty walls between the glossy frames. "You did," she murmured. "Just don't forget the ground you came from." The words hung in the air, gentle but sharp enough to cut. Claire's expression hardened. "I haven't forgotten, Mom. I just learned to live differently." Helen's eyes softened with quiet hurt. Differently doesn't mean alone. A housekeeper entered with tea, moving with trained precision. "Would you like sugar, ma'am?" she asked Helen politely. Helen smiled awkwardly. "Oh, thank you, dear. Just one spoon." Claire sat across, fingers lightly drumming the glass table. "I didn't expect you to come here." "I figured," Helen said with a wry smile. "You haven't been answering my calls." "I've been busy," Claire replied quickly. "Running a company doesn't leave much time for." She trailed off, searching for a word that wouldn't sound cruel. "For what?" Helen asked softly. "For visits." The honesty landed like a stone. Helen nodded, stirring her tea slowly. "I used to think success meant having more time for the people you love. I guess I got that wrong." Claire flinched. "Mom, please don't start." "I'm not starting anything," Helen interrupted gently. "I just wanted to see you. To know you're okay." "I am okay." Helen smiled sadly. Then why does it sound like you're convincing yourself? The daughter's face faltered for a split second before she caught herself. You wouldn't understand, Mom. This life, it's not simple. Helen leaned forward. Sweetheart, love isn't simple either. But it's worth it. Claire's throat tightened. Please don't make this about love. You left me when things got hard. Helen blinked, stunned. What? You told me I was chasing a dream that would ruin me. You didn't believe in me, Mom. You made me feel small when I needed your support. Helen's hands trembled. I was scared, Claire. Scared you'd lose yourself trying to impress a world that doesn't care about your heart. Well, Claire whispered bitterly, the world noticed me. Eventually. The silence after that was unbearable, thick with 10 years of misunderstanding. Helen rose slowly, setting her cup down. You're right, she said softly. I didn't believe in that dream. But I never stopped believing in you. Claire looked up, her mask faltering. Why now, Mom? Why come after all these years? Helen hesitated. Her fingers tightened around her bag. Because I got tired of pretending I didn't miss you. For a moment, Claire's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. You could have written. I did. 100 times. But I never sent them. Why not? Helen smiled faintly. Because every time I did, I worried you'd moved on. The rawness in her voice cracked something deep inside Claire. She turned away, pretending to straighten a vase just to hide her trembling hands. You don't know how hard it's been to get here, Mom. How many people looked at me like I didn't belong. I had to become someone else to survive. Helen's eyes welled up. And did that someone else make you happy? Claire didn't answer. Her silence said everything. Helen reached into her coat and pulled out the old photograph, the same one she'd looked at that morning. She placed it gently on the table between them. I brought this, she said. Claire's breath caught. She reached out, fingertips brushing the worn edges. It was the two of them at her graduation. Smiling, holding hands, joy unguarded. Claire's voice cracked. I remember this day. So do I, Helen whispered. You said, Mom, we did it. Not, I did it. We. The word hit Claire harder than she expected. Tears welled, but she turned away again, voice trembling. I don't know who I am anymore, Mom. The more I achieved, the lonelier I got. And I thought, maybe if I stayed busy enough, I wouldn't feel it. Helen reached across the table, placing her hand gently over her daughter's. You don't have to be lonely anymore, sweetheart. I'm here. For a long, fragile second, Claire didn't pull away. Then her phone buzzed, sharp, mechanical, breaking the moment. She withdrew her hand, stood, and turned to the window. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Helen's voice was barely a whisper. I see. The distance between them returned, heavier now because they had just touched something real. Helen rose, her eyes tired but kind. I won't stay long. I just wanted to see your face again. Claire turned, eyes glistening. You can stay the night if you want. The guest rooms. No, Helen said softly. I'll find a place nearby. The mother reached the door, pausing. You have everything, Claire. But don't forget, love built you first. Claire stood motionless as the door clicked shut behind her. The mansion felt colder. For the first time in years, Claire felt small, a child again in a world too big for her. She picked up the photograph her mother had left behind and whispered, I thought I was doing this for you. Her reflection in the glass looked back, but didn't answer. Claire stood alone in the vast silence of her success, clutching a photo worth more than all her awards. The ache was unbearable, because the moment she saw her mother again, she realized she hadn't been living, just achieving. Have you ever chased something so hard that you lost the people who mattered most? Would you turn back if you could? Share your thoughts below because sometimes one conversation can change everything. That evening, the city's skyline bled orange into deep blue, reflecting across the mansion's endless windows. Claire stood near the glass wall, the photograph still in her hands. The world outside looked so far away, distant, shimmering, untouchable, like everything she had built. Behind her, the echo of her mother's goodbye lingered in the air like the fading scent of rain. She ran her fingers over the old photo, tracing her mother's smile. For the first time in years, she saw herself as the girl beside her. Not the CEO, not the brand, not the millionaire, but the daughter. Why did she really come? Claire whispered to herself. To forgive me. Or to remind me what I lost. Her phone buzzed again. Riley's name flashed on the screen. She almost answered, but didn't. The noise of her world suddenly felt unbearable. Meanwhile, Helen sat alone in a modest cafe a few streets away. Her suitcase tucked under the table. The city felt too bright, too polished, too fast. She stirred her coffee absently, watching strangers rush past the window. Everyone in a hurry to go somewhere, no one really seeing anyone else. A waitress approached. You okay, ma'am? Helen smiled faintly. Yes, dear. Just tired. But she wasn't tired. She was aching. She looked at the folded bus ticket in her purse, the one that could take her home. A part of her wanted to leave that very night, to disappear before disappointment swallowed her whole. But something inside whispered, not yet. Claire had let her in. Briefly, yes, but that was something. There was still love in her eyes. Hidden, frightened, but there. Helen reached for her phone, typing a message. I didn't mean to upset you. I just missed you. Always have. Her finger hovered over send, then stopped. She deleted it. Let her come to me, she muttered softly, ashamed of how much that hurt to say. Later that night, Claire sat at her desk, trying to focus on numbers, contracts, projections, but her eyes kept blurring. Every graph, every chart, every success reminded her of how empty this place felt. Her assistant Riley called again, concern heavy in her voice. Claire, are you okay? You left early today. I'm fine, Claire replied. You don't sound fine. I said I'm fine, Claire snapped, more harshly than she intended. The line went silent. She closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. I'm sorry, Riley, she whispered after ending the call. It's not your fault. In the quiet that followed, her mother's words replayed in her mind. Love built you first. She pushed her chair back and walked through the mansion, her footsteps echoing in every empty hall. The house was beautiful, yes, but there was no laughter, no warmth, no life. A sudden knock startled her. She opened the door to find Helen standing there again, soaked from a drizzle that had started outside, eyes tired but resolute. Mom! Claire breathed. Why? I forgot my scarf, Helen lied softly, holding her own coat tighter. They both knew it wasn't true. Claire hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. The kitchen felt warmer than before. The smell of something simple, soup, bread, butter, filled the air. Helen had insisted on cooking. I can't think straight without food, she'd said, and Claire, too drained to argue, had let her. Now they sat at the island counter. Two women separated by a decade of silence and a foot of marble countertop. Helen dipped her spoon, took a sip, and smiled. Still remember how you used to complain about my soup? Claire managed a small laugh. It was always too salty. Helen chuckled softly. And you always ate it anyway. The sound of shared laughter, hesitant but real, softened the tension between them. After a pause, Helen looked up. Why didn't you tell me about all of this? Claire's eyes stayed on her spoon. You wouldn't have approved. I would have been proud, Helen said gently. You didn't sound proud back then, Claire shot back, voice rising slightly. You told me I was chasing foolish dreams, that I was throwing my life away. Helen's expression faltered. I was scared, Claire. The world wasn't kind to girls with big dreams when I was young. Well, I made it kind, Claire said bitterly. Yes, Helen whispered. But did you make it kind to yourself? Claire froze. Her chest tightened. I don't know what that means. Helen's gaze softened. You do. After dinner, Helen stood to leave again. Thank you for letting me stay a while, she said, her tone fragile but sincere. You don't have to go yet, Claire replied quickly, almost instinctively. Helen smiled sadly. You have a meeting in the morning, remember? Claire hesitated. You read the article, didn't you? I did, Helen said. You've built something incredible, honey. But I hope someday you find something worth building your heart around, too. The words hit Claire like a whisper and a wound at once. Helen stepped closer, brushing a stray hair from her daughter's face like she had when Claire was a child. I'm not here to take anything from you. I just wanted to remember who we were. Claire's eyes glistened. And if I don't know who that is anymore? Helen smiled through tears. Then we'll find her together. But Claire turned away, shaking her head. Don't make promises, Mom. Not if you'll just leave again. The quiet that followed was painful. Helen nodded slowly. All right, she said softly. Then I'll wait right here until you're ready. She picked up her scarf and walked toward the guest room. Claire watched her go, lips pressed tight to keep from breaking. Later, when Helen was asleep, Claire sat in the living room. Lights dimmed, the city glowing faintly outside. She scrolled through old photos on her phone. One of them stopped her. A childhood picture of her sitting on her mother's lap, covered in paint after art class. Both were laughing. Her thumb trembled as she whispered, I remember that day. A tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, as if even now she wasn't allowed to cry. She didn't know what scared her more, losing her mother again or letting her close enough to hurt her. The night pressed heavy over the mansion, full of unsaid words and fragile hope. Both women lay awake, a wall between them, but their thoughts reaching for each other in the dark. The next morning, rain hammered the city in relentless sheets. Lightning flashed across the glass walls of Claire's mansion, thunder rumbling through its hollow spaces. Helen stood by the window, watching the storm swallow the skyline. Looks like I won't be going anywhere today, she murmured half to herself. Claire appeared behind her, coffee in hand. Her hair was slightly undone, her expression unreadable. The roads are flooded, she said. You'll have to stay until it clears. Helen turned, offering a gentle smile. Guess we're stuck together, huh? Claire gave a small shrug, pretending indifference. Looks that way. But deep down, something inside her softened, a strange comfort she didn't want to admit. Helen took over the kitchen, moving with quiet confidence. You've got every appliance known to man, but no actual food, she teased lightly, holding up an empty bread box. Claire smirked faintly. I usually just order something. I can see that, Helen said with a grin. When was the last time you cooked? Claire thought for a moment, realizing she couldn't remember. College, maybe. Well, we'll fix that today. Within minutes, the kitchen smelled of butter, eggs, and toasting bread. Ordinary human smells that filled the sterile mansion with life for the first time. Claire leaned against the counter, watching her mother hum softly while cooking. You still do that, she said, half smiling. Do what? Humming. You used to do it when I couldn't sleep. Helen paused, the memory flickering in her eyes. I remember. You always wanted the same song. Claire's lips curved upward, almost shyly. The one about the moonlight. Helen chuckled. That's the one. She began to hum it again quietly, a simple lullaby that suddenly made the mansion feel like home. For a fleeting moment, neither woman was guarded. The storm outside raged, but inside, something small and healing began to grow. They ate together in silence at first. The sound of rain softened the edges of the moment. Helen glanced at her daughter. You always said you wanted to design clothes, even as a little girl. You used to cut up my curtains for fabric. Claire laughed softly. You were furious. I was, until I saw the dress you made for your doll. I still have it somewhere. Claire blinked, surprised. You kept it? Helen nodded. Of course. I kept everything you ever made. I was just too proud to tell you. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was tender. After a moment, Claire said quietly, Mom, you were right about one thing. Success isn't what I thought it would be. Every time I hit a goal, I just set a higher one. It never stops. Helen's eyes filled with quiet understanding. That's because what you're chasing isn't out there, sweetheart. It's in here. She tapped her chest. And it's waiting for you to stop running long enough to see it. Claire looked down, blinking fast. You make it sound so simple. It's not, Helen said softly. But love never left you, Claire. You just stopped believing it was safe. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The storm had taken the power with it. Claire sighed. Great. That's just perfect. Helen chuckled softly. You always hated the dark. Claire rolled her eyes. I was 7, Mom. Still counts. They found candles and set them on the counter. The soft glow painted their faces in gold, casting shadows that made the mansion feel smaller, warmer. Helen looked around. You know, this place is beautiful. But it feels lonely. Claire hesitated. Sometimes I think it's too big for me. Helen smiled gently. Maybe it's just waiting to be filled with laughter again. Their eyes met in the candlelight. Mother and daughter, both realizing how much they'd missed not just each other, but this. The quiet safety of belonging. They sat on the couch as rain whispered against the windows. Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. You know, I used to think that if I made enough money, people would finally see me. That I'd never feel small again. Helen tilted her head. And do you feel seen now? Claire's voice cracked. No. I feel invisible. Helen reached over, touching her hand. You were never invisible to me. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. You don't understand how hard it was. You said I'd fail. You said I was dreaming too big. And when things got tough, I thought you gave up on me. Helen's throat tightened. I didn't give up on you. I just didn't know how to protect you. Every mother wants to stop their child from getting hurt, even if it means being the bad guy. Claire looked away. Well, it worked. The silence that followed was thick and trembling. Helen swallowed hard, then whispered, I'm sorry. For every word that made you doubt yourself. I was wrong. The words broke something open in Claire. She didn't answer right away, she couldn't. The sound of her mother saying sorry after all these years hit harder than any apology she'd imagined. Claire finally whispered, You don't owe me an apology, Mom. I owe you one too. Helen smiled softly. Then let's call it even. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that comes after years of holding tears. As the night deepened, they sat near the window, watching the storm ease into drizzle. Helen leaned back, humming the lullaby again. Claire joined in, her voice quiet but sure. For the first time in years, they sang together. When the lights finally flickered back on, Claire looked at her mother and said, You know, it's strange. When the power went out, it felt like the house finally breathed. Helen smiled. Sometimes the dark helps us see what's been here all along. As the storm faded, a fragile peace settled between them. Not yet forgiveness, not yet wholeness, but something real. The mansion didn't feel as empty anymore. The next morning broke quiet and silver, the storm finally gone. Sunlight spilled across the marble floors, revealing a peace the house hadn't known in years. Helen stood by the window, watching birds flit between the dripping trees. The scent of coffee filled the air. Behind her, Claire entered. Hair still tousled from sleep, barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater that softened her usual sharpness. You're up early, Claire murmured. Old habits, Helen replied with a smile. Farm mornings don't leave you easy. Claire poured herself coffee and joined her mother at the window. The city doesn't really sleep. But last night, it felt different. Helen nodded. Maybe because for once you weren't alone. Claire's gaze dropped to her cup, her expression unreadable. I didn't realize how loud silence could be until you came. Helen smiled faintly. Silence can be a kind of scream, sweetheart. They sat at the breakfast table, the warmth between them delicate but real. Helen looked at her daughter carefully. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you stop writing? Claire stiffened. I didn't think you wanted to hear from me. Helen frowned. Why would you think that? Claire set her cup down, her voice trembling slightly. Because you didn't come when I needed you. Not when the landlord kicked me out of my first apartment. Not when I got fired from my first job. Not when She stopped. Helen leaned forward, concern deepening. When you what? Claire exhaled shakily. When I was in the hospital, Mom. Helen froze. Hospital? Claire nodded, eyes glistening. I worked myself to exhaustion. Collapsed during a presentation. No one even knew who to call. I put your name down but... Her voice broke. You never came. Helen's hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide. Oh God. Claire, I never knew. I sent letters, Claire whispered. You didn't answer. Helen's breath hitched as realization dawned. Letters. I never got them. The air between them thickened. Helen pushed her chair back and stood, pacing as tears welled. Your stepfather, he must have hidden them. He never wanted me writing you. Said it was better for you to learn on your own. Claire's eyes widened, disbelief and pain clashing in her chest. You're saying he kept my letters? Helen nodded, trembling. All of them, it seems. He thought he was protecting me from more heartbreak. I thought you'd stopped loving me, Claire. Claire stood, emotion flooding her voice. And I thought you stopped loving me. Their words collided. 2 decades of pain released in a single breath. Helen dug into her old handbag and pulled out a folded envelope. Yellowed, worn. I carried this for years, she said, her voice trembling. A letter I never sent. She handed it to Claire. With shaking hands, Claire opened it. The handwriting was messy but familiar. Every loop, every curve a piece of her childhood. My dearest Claire. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for the things I said. I was scared, not of your dreams, but of losing you to a world that could break your heart. You were always stronger than I let myself admit. If you're out there chasing something beautiful, I hope it fills your soul. And if it hurts, come home. I'll be waiting. Love, Mum. Claire read it twice, tears spilling freely now. You really wrote this? I wrote it 100 times, Helen said softly. But I never had the courage to send it. I thought, maybe you'd already moved on. Claire clutched the paper to her chest. All these years, we could have had each other. Helen stepped closer, her own tears falling. We still can. Claire disappeared into another room and returned with a small, dusty box. You're not the only one who kept things, she said with a shaky smile. She opened it to reveal old photographs. Childhood drawings, newspaper clippings, tiny sketches of dresses, each with "For Mom" scribbled at the corner. Helen gasped softly. You kept all this? Every bit, Claire said. Even when I couldn't look at them, I couldn't throw them away. They were my reminder that someone once believed in me. Helen took one of the drawings, a crayon sketch of a mother and daughter holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Across the top, in crooked handwriting, it read, Me and Mommy, together forever. Helen's voice broke. Oh, sweetheart. Claire's hand found her mother's. I guess forever just took a little longer than we thought. They laughed through tears, the sound fragile but pure. After a long silence, Claire asked, Mom, were you happy? After I left. Helen looked down, her face softening with age and memory. I tried to be. But happiness without you was like breathing half an air. Claire swallowed hard. I thought leaving was the only way to prove I could make it. I didn't realize I was proving it to the wrong person. Helen smiled through tears. You proved it to me, Claire. You always did. The younger woman's defenses fell completely. She leaned into her mother's arms, hesitant at first, then fully, like a child who had been waiting her entire life to feel safe again. Helen wrapped her tightly, whispering, It's okay, baby. You don't have to be strong all the time. Claire's tears soaked her mother's shoulder. I'm sorry, Mom, for hating you, for believing lies, for forgetting what love felt like. Helen held her tighter. And I'm sorry for letting my fear speak louder than my faith in you. They stayed like that for a long, quiet minute, two hearts rediscovering the rhythm they'd lost. When they finally pulled apart, the room was bathed in sunlight. The storm had passed, but its cleansing lingered. Helen laughed softly. You know, when I left this morning, I thought I'd lost you for good. But I think I just found you again. Claire smiled through tears. No, Mum. We found each other. Helen brushed a tear from her cheek. And we're not losing this again. The truth had finally been spoken, and with it came freedom. Not just from blame, but from years of silence that had stolen their joy. If you discovered that years of pain between you and someone you loved were built on misunderstanding, would you have the courage to forgive? The day after their long, tearful night began quietly. Sunlight warm on the kitchen counter, the air scented with coffee and toast again. But this morning, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Helen hummed the lullaby again while flipping pancakes, her movements slow and sure. Claire entered, barefoot, hair unbrushed, but smiling. A real smile this time, not the practiced one she wore for cameras or clients. You're humming again, Claire said softly. Helen laughed. I only do it when my heart's light. Claire poured coffee and joined her. Then hum all you want. Helen placed a pancake on her plate and said, You know, when you were little, you always tried to make faces on your pancakes. You'd use berries for eyes, syrup for a smile. Claire smiled wistfully. You used to say, food tastes better when it's happy. Helen chuckled. Still true. They ate in quiet joy. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because for once, they didn't need to fill the silence with explanations. Love was speaking for them. Later that morning, Claire led her mother outside to the mansion's back garden, a space she had never really used. It was beautiful but unkempt, wild vines and weeds creeping along the stone pathway. Helen's eyes softened. You've got all this land, and not a single flower blooming. Claire shrugged. I never had time. Well, Helen said, rolling up her sleeves, we'll make time. Before Claire could protest, her mother was already kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds with surprising energy. Go grab me a spade, she ordered with a playful grin. Claire hesitated, then smiled. You're serious. Dead serious. Flowers don't plant themselves. For the next hour they worked side by side. Helen hummed while Claire tried and failed to remember how to garden. Dirt covered their hands, sweat dotted their foreheads, but laughter filled the air. At one point Claire looked over and said, You know, I haven't laughed like this in years. Helen looked up, smiling. Laughter's the soul's apology for taking life too seriously. Claire chuckled. You always have a quote for everything. I learned from the best, Helen teased, nudging her. For a moment, time didn't exist. It was just a mother and daughter, side by side in the soil, planting new beginnings. As they finished, the sound of tires crunching on gravel interrupted their laughter. A sleek car pulled into the driveway. It was Riley, Claire's assistant. She stepped out, surprised to see Claire in a t-shirt and jeans, kneeling in dirt beside an older woman. Boss! Riley blinked. You garden now? Claire grinned sheepishly. Trying something new. Riley smiled, glancing at Helen. And who's your friend? Claire's eyes softened. My mother. Helen extended her hand warmly. Nice to meet you, dear. Riley shook it, smiling. I've heard a lot about you. Helen chuckled. I'm guessing not all good. Actually, Riley said gently, you'd be surprised. After a moment, Riley turned to Claire. You look happy. Claire paused, looking at her mother before answering. Yeah, I think I finally am. That evening, Claire did something she hadn't done in years. She cooked dinner herself. Helen watched, amused, as her daughter fumbled through recipes. You've got too much salt, Helen said, chuckling. Claire winked. Old habits die hard. When the meal was done, slightly burned, slightly over-seasoned, they sat at the long dining table together. But unlike the first night, it didn't feel cavernous anymore. Helen raised her glass. To forgiveness. Claire raised hers. To second chances. They clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time, both women meant it. During dinner they really talked. About Claire's business, her childhood, the people they'd lost. About dreams, and the things they still wanted to do. At one point Helen said softly, "You know, I've always wanted to see Paris. But I never had the money." Claire smiled mischievously. "Well, that I can fix." Helen's eyes widened. "Claire, no." "Mom," Claire interrupted, laughing. "Let me spoil you a little. It's my turn." Helen smiled, shaking her head. "You always were unstoppable." Claire met her gaze tenderly. "I learned that from you." After dinner, they sat in the living room with a blanket and tea, flipping through the old photo album again. Claire pointed to one photo, a little girl in a Halloween costume, covered in glitter. "You made that costume in one night." Helen laughed. "You changed your mind 3 times. I think I glued half the living room carpet." They both laughed until tears streamed down their cheeks. When they caught their breath, Claire said quietly, "I missed this. I missed you." Helen smiled through tears. "And I missed the girl who used to dream out loud." Claire took her mother's hand. "She's still here, Mom. I just forgot where I put her." Helen squeezed her fingers gently. "Then let's never lose her again." Later that night, Claire disappeared upstairs and returned with a small box. "I've been saving this for years," she said. Inside was a gold bracelet, simple but elegant, engraved with the words, "Love built me first." Helen's breath caught. "Oh, Claire. You said that to me once when I got my first job offer," Claire said softly. "It stuck. I wanted to remember that before I was anything else, I was yours." Helen's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "It's perfect." Claire smiled. "No, Mum. You're perfect." That night, as they prepared for bed, Helen paused at the doorway of Claire's room. "You were a beautiful child," she said softly. "And you've become a remarkable woman." Claire smiled sleepily. "You think so?" "I know so." Helen hesitated, then added, "I'm proud of you, Claire. Always have been." Claire's voice broke. "I've waited my whole life to hear that." Helen walked over and kissed her forehead. "Then I'm sorry it took so long." As the night deepened, peace settled over the house, the kind that comes only when love finds its way home again. 2 days after their reconciliation, the mansion felt alive again. Laughter echoed in the halls. Helen cooked breakfast. Claire handled business calls from the counter instead of her sterile office. But peace, as always, was fragile. That morning, Claire's assistant Riley arrived earlier than expected. Her face was tight, cautious. "Claire," she said quietly, "you need to see this." She handed over a folded newspaper. On the front page, "Charity Queen's estranged mother moves in. PR strategy or sentiment." Beneath it was a photo, taken through the mansion's gate, of Claire and Helen gardening together. The caption was cruel. "Reunion or reputation move." Claire's stomach dropped. "Who leaked this?" Riley shook her head. "No idea. But the press is already speculating. Investors are asking questions." Helen appeared in the doorway, drying her hands. "What's wrong?" Claire hesitated, the silence long enough to cut. "You should probably see this." Helen took the paper, scanning it slowly. Her face fell. "Oh, Claire." "It's fine," Claire said tightly. "I'll handle it." But Helen caught the coldness in her tone. "Handle it how?" "By controlling the narrative. I'll have my PR team issue a statement." Helen frowned. "A statement? Claire, this is our life, not a business deal." Claire's voice sharpened. "Everything is a deal when your name's worth millions." Helen's eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. "You can't manage people's hearts, Claire. You can only open them." Claire slammed the paper down. "Do you think I want this? That I called the press for fun?" Helen shook her head. "No. But I think you care more about how it looks than how it feels." The words hit like a knife. "That's not fair," Claire said quietly. Helen stepped closer. Neither was the way you froze me out for years. Claire's jaw tightened. We already talked about that. Then why are you doing it again? Claire's eyes flashed. Because I can't afford another scandal. Do you know what I've worked for? How hard it was to build this from nothing? Helen whispered. And yet you're still afraid to lose it. That silence, the kind that turns air to glass, stretched between them. Finally Claire said, voice trembling. You should go back home, Mom. This isn't working. Helen's breath hitched. You don't mean that. Claire turned away. Please. Just go. Helen stared at her daughter, heart pounding. After everything we just went through. Claire's voice cracked. I can't think straight. Every time I try to do something right, it backfires. Maybe we're better apart. Helen's eyes filled with tears. You're scared, Claire. You're pushing me away before I can leave you again. Don't psychoanalyze me, Mom. Then listen to me as your mother. Helen snapped, stepping closer. Money doesn't love you back. People do. And if you keep chasing control, you'll lose everything that matters. Claire's composure shattered. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent every night wishing someone loved me for me? Her voice broke into a sob. But people don't. They love what I've made. What I give them. Helen's eyes softened instantly, tears glimmering. Then let me love you for you. But Claire stepped back, shaking her head. I can't. Not right now. The look on Helen's face, heartbreak mixed with surrender, was unbearable. She whispered, I'll pack my things. Claire didn't stop her. Rain began to fall again that evening, soft at first, then steady. Helen stood by the door, suitcase in hand, the gold bracelet glinting faintly in the gray light. Claire lingered at the staircase, arms folded, face unreadable. Helen managed a small smile. I guess storms follow us. Claire's throat tightened. You don't have to go. Helen gave a sad laugh. You told me to. I didn't mean. Claire stopped herself, pride winning the war against pain. It's better this way. Helen studied her daughter for a long moment, memorizing her face, her strength, her fear. I love you, she said simply. Even if you forget again. Claire's lips parted, but no words came out. She just nodded, fighting tears she refused to show. Helen turned, opened the door, and stepped into the rain. The sound of it closing behind her felt like the echo of every goodbye they'd ever said. Hours passed. The house was quiet, too quiet. Claire sat at her desk, trying to focus on work, but the numbers blurred. Every surface gleamed, cold, perfect, lifeless. She glanced at the empty chair across from her, the one her mother had sat in that first morning. The scarf Helen had forgotten last time still hung on the chair's back. Claire reached for it, pressing it to her face. It smelled faintly of lavender and rain. Her chest ached. On the kitchen counter, her phone buzzed. A message from Riley. I know it's none of my business, but maybe you should go after her. Not as her daughter. Just as a woman who misses her mom. Claire stared at the message until her vision blurred. Finally she whispered, I can't lose her again. Meanwhile, Helen sat in a small diner near the edge of the city. Hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. The rain beat against the window. She looked down at the bracelet. Love built me first. Her fingers traced the words again and again like a prayer. She whispered, Please God, don't let this be how it ends. Tears fell silently into her tea. For all her faith, for all her wisdom, the one thing Helen couldn't teach herself was how to stop missing her daughter. Back at the mansion, Claire walked through every room, feeling the ghost of her mother's presence. The kitchen where they laughed. The garden they planted. The candlelit living room. Everywhere she went, there was silence, and the faint echo of forgiveness she'd thrown away. Finally she stopped at the window. Rain fell in ribbons outside, glistening like tears. She whispered to the glass, I'm sorry, Mom. The bond they'd fought to rebuild now teetered on the edge of breaking again. But love, real love, doesn't die easily. It lingers, even in silence, waiting for courage to call it back. Have you ever said something you didn't mean just to protect yourself, only to wish you could take it back? What would you do differently if you could? The next morning, sunlight crawled through the blinds, touching every corner of Claire's home like a gentle accusation. The air felt heavier than usual, still hollow. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her eyes were swollen from a sleepless night. On the nightstand sat the photo she'd left there for years. Her and her mother, back when laughter was easy. Her phone lay beside it, dark and silent. No calls, no messages. Claire whispered, "She's really gone." The words trembled in the air, fragile and breaking. At a modest inn just outside the city, Helen folded her clothes into her suitcase with slow, deliberate care. The gold bracelet caught the morning light, glinting faintly. She looked at herself in the mirror, her eyes tired but kind. "Don't you dare cry again," she told her reflection. You did what she wanted. But the words rang hollow. In truth, she wanted nothing more than to turn around, knock on her daughter's door, and say "I forgive you" before you even ask me to. Still she hesitated. She'd been rejected once too many times to risk breaking again. Helen picked up her phone, typing a message she wasn't sure she'd send. "I'm heading home. I'll always love you, Claire. Always." Her thumb hovered over send. But she couldn't press it. Back at the mansion, Claire's assistant Riley arrived unannounced. She placed a stack of reports on the table, all about the charity's image, the fallout, the headlines. Claire skimmed them briefly, then pushed them aside. "I don't care." Riley blinked. "You don't care." Claire's voice cracked. "It's just noise. I cared more about what people thought than what she felt. And now she's gone." Riley sat across from her, softening. "Then go after her." Claire shook her head. "You don't get it. Every time I let my guard down, something breaks. I can't keep losing people I love." Riley leaned in gently. "Maybe that's because you've been choosing safety over love." Claire looked up, startled. Riley smiled faintly. "You taught me something, Claire. That real success isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave. So go be brave." Claire swallowed hard. "You think she'll take me back?" "I think she already has," Riley said softly. Claire sat alone, her mind drifting back to the day she left home at 18. She saw her younger self, angry, crying, yelling words she didn't mean. Her mother standing in the doorway, silent tears running down her face. "I'll come back when I've made something of myself," young Claire had shouted. Helen's answer echoed in her memory. "I just want you to come back." The memory sliced through the years. Claire whispered, "You never asked me to be rich. You just wanted me to be yours." Tears spilled freely now, unstoppable. She grabbed her car keys and ran. At the small bus station outside town, Helen sat on a wooden bench, her suitcase by her feet. She looked at the ticket in her hand. One way back home. Rain had begun to fall again, soft and steady. She sighed. "Guess even the sky can't say goodbye without crying." The intercom announced the bus's arrival. Passengers shuffled toward the door. Helen stood slowly, heart aching. And then she heard it. A familiar voice calling out over the rain. "Mom!" Helen turned. Through the mist, Claire came running, drenched, breathless, eyes red from tears. "Claire!" Claire stopped in front of her, panting. "Don't go. Please." Helen's lips trembled. "I thought you wanted me to. I was wrong." They stood in the rain. No umbrellas, no distance. Just truth. Claire's voice shook. "You were right about everything. I thought control was love, but it's fear. And I've been living in fear since the day I left you." Helen reached up, brushing wet hair from her daughter's face. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Tears mingled with the rain as Claire choked out. "I said things I didn't mean. Hurt you. I just didn't know how to be loved anymore." Helen's own tears fell freely now. "And I didn't know how to stop losing you." They both laughed through their tears, a sound that was half sob, half healing. Claire whispered, "Can we start over?" Helen smiled softly. "We never ended." The bus driver called out, "Last boarding." Helen looked at her ticket, then at her daughter. She tore it neatly in half and let the pieces fall to the wet pavement. Claire gasped softly. "You're staying?" Helen nodded, smiling through tears. "Where else would I be?" They embraced, tightly, fiercely, as if holding each other could undo time itself. The rain poured harder, but neither cared. "I love you, Mom," Claire whispered. "I know," Helen said. "You've been saying it since you came running." They walked back to the car, drenched and laughing like children. Helen looked at her daughter. "You realize you just made a public scene, right?" Claire grinned. "Let them write about that." Helen chuckled. "Oh, they will." As Claire started the engine, she glanced at her mother. "This time I'm not letting fear drive." Helen smiled proudly. "That's my girl." Back at the mansion, the first thing Claire did was hand her mother a towel and say, "Welcome home." Helen looked around and said softly, "It's beautiful. But you know what would make it perfect?" Claire smiled knowingly. "Let me guess, flowers." Helen laughed. "Exactly." They looked out at the garden through the rain-smeared glass, the tiny sprouts they'd planted just beginning to show green. New life, new love. If you had one more chance to tell someone what they really mean to you, would you take it, or wait for them to go first? The next morning was unlike any they'd shared before. The rain had passed, leaving the city washed and bright. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows of Claire's kitchen, bathing everything in gold. Helen stood by the stove, stirring oatmeal, humming softly. She wore one of Claire's aprons, far too big for her, and it made her laugh. Claire entered quietly, still sleepy, hair messy, face unguarded. For once, she wasn't the millionaire CEO. She was just a daughter walking into her mother's arms. "Morning," she said, voice still raspy. Helen turned, smiling. "Morning, sweetheart. Coffee's ready." Claire sat down at the counter, watching her mother move. Every small motion, the tilt of the pot, the hum under her breath, filled her chest with something she hadn't felt in years. After breakfast, Claire disappeared for a moment, returning with a small velvet box. Helen blinked. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with tiny words in looping script. Helen squinted to read them. "Love built me first." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Claire." "I had it made," Claire said softly, "to match your bracelet. So you'll never forget. I carry your love everywhere I go." Helen's eyes shimmered. "Oh, darling. You always had it. You just stopped believing it was enough." Claire nodded, tears welling. "You're right. But I want to do better. For you. For us." Helen reached over, clasping her hand. "Then we both already won." Later that afternoon they walked outside together, the ground still damp from the rain. The garden they'd planted days ago had begun to sprout, tiny green shoots pushing through dark soil. Helen knelt, touching a bud gently. "See that? Life always finds its way back." Claire crouched beside her. "Even after the storm." Helen smiled knowingly. "Especially after the storm." They worked in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels safe, full of unspoken love. Then Helen said softly, "You know, when I first came here, I thought I was visiting a stranger." Claire looked up. "And now?" Helen smiled. "Now I see my little girl again." As they finished, Claire glanced at her mother's wrist, the gold bracelet glinting in the sun. She asked quietly, "Why did you keep it all these years?" Helen chuckled. "Because you made it for me. Because every time I looked at it, I heard your voice." "What did it say?" Claire whispered. Helen looked at her daughter with tears in her eyes. "It said, 'Don't give up on me.'" Claire pressed a hand over her heart, voice trembling. "I never will again." Helen smiled, brushing a tear from Claire's cheek. "I know, honey. I know." That evening, Claire stood before a small crowd in her mansion's garden, hosting the charity dinner she'd planned months ago. But this time, her speech wasn't rehearsed, and her mother stood proudly in the front row. Claire took a deep breath. Tonight, I want to talk about what real wealth means. The audience quieted. It's not what's in your account, it's who waits for you at home. It's forgiveness. It's love that survives distance and pride. She turned toward Helen, voice catching. It's a mother who never stopped believing in me. Gasps rippled softly through the crowd as Helen's eyes filled with tears. Claire smiled and continued. For years I thought success would make me whole. But what really made me rich was her love. The audience erupted into quiet applause, not out of formality, but from being moved. Helen mouthed, "I'm proud of you." Claire smiled back. "No." After the guests had gone, mother and daughter lingered under the string lights. The night air was cool, scented with rain and garden blossoms. Helen looked up at the stars. "You know, your father would have loved this. You standing tall, but grounded." Claire nodded softly. "I wish he were here." Helen squeezed her hand. "He is. He's in you." They sat in silence, gazing at the stars, both knowing, no matter what came next, they'd found each other again. Helen rose from her chair, stretching. "I should head inside. It's getting late." Claire grinned. "I'll walk you." As they reached the mansion's grand glass doors, the same doors where their silence once began, Helen paused. Claire opened them for her and said softly, "Welcome home, Mom." Helen turned, her eyes shining with tears and pride. "That's the first time I've ever heard you say that." Claire smiled. "Then I'll say it again." Helen laughed, warm, free, alive. "I love you, sweetheart." Claire whispered, "I love you more." And this time neither looked away. A year later, the mansion looked different, softer. The garden had bloomed wildly. The house felt lived in, loved in. Helen sat on the porch, knitting while humming, the bracelet still on her wrist. Claire walked up behind her, holding 2 cups of tea. "Guess what?" Claire said, smiling. "I just got a call. The charity reached 1 million in donations, and they're naming a new community center after you." Helen laughed, eyes wide. "After me? Why?" Claire placed a cup in her hand. "Because it started with you." Helen blinked, then smiled with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Claire." Claire sat beside her, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "I visited my millionaire daughter," Helen said softly, repeating the words with a playful twist. Claire laughed. "And what did she do?" Helen's voice trembled with joy. "She left me speechless, with love." Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this video, and I'm confident you enjoyed it. We've got plenty more exciting and heartwarming stories waiting for you. Just click on the image on your screen to watch the next one.